So I've been milling around and chatting. Thank you for not only coming, but enjoying what we're doing. I think that's the general feeling I get. We're celebrating Fiona together. We're enjoying her creativity, and we're supporting a good cause. So right, back to Guillermo and Sandra. Are you on the edge of your seats? After the coffee, they resumed their circuit of the market. Sandra felt emboldened to try on a jacket she'd noticed, though there was no mirror on that stall, but today she had a female supporter to give an opinion. The jacket was gorgeous, but she feared it was a bit small. It said large, but she reckoned that was large by Indonesian standards, judging from the label of origin. The stall holder told her he would bring XL next week. Sin problema. Meanwhile, the two stall holders either side of the jacket stall were watching the performance of the blonde struggling to get her arms out of the sleeves. Mas zapato, menos plato, called the man on the right, indicating she should buy a pair of his trainers. Rocío made a swift retort after explaining to Sandra that more shoe, less plate was the local advice on how to lose weight. The guy on the left held out a plate of his delicious chorizo and encouraged her to ignore this advice. His hand gestures told her she could afford to put on a bit more weight as far as he was concerned. Back at home, she would have taken offence and gotten her high horse about treatment of women in public. But here, she didn't have it in her to fight, even if she did have the language. She accepted a piece of chorizo and smiled at the greasy butcher, or whatever job title you gave to men who made these embutidos. In the following weeks, the students had to prepare for their 4 exam activities: writing, reading, listening, and speaking. She was now adhering to the fixed lesson plans, and the students had to talk and write about topical issues rather than more personal experiences or opinions. She knew the exams required students to hold certain views on such diverse topics as education, culture, child rearing, and renewable energy. This year, the list included suggestions for refugees and civic duties. Students were advised not to express strong political opinions in their monologue or dialogue exams, as one never knew who the examiner would be, and it was silly to fail an expensive exam just to score a political point. All very un-British, Sandra felt as she corrected the practice papers, where each student recited the same careful opinions and sat on the fence. She mentally added that phrase to her word list for next year's class on locations. What had Guillermo meant when he said he wasn't in the market yet? Rocío was often in the market. She hadn't called on Sandra's door again, but as soon as she approached the grandparents' stall, she would see her waiting and they would spend time together looking around. The bigger jacket did indeed arrive, but to her shame, Sandra needed XXL. She decided it was between a size 12 and 14, so whatever size would her curvier mother need. Finally, the exams were over, and her class presented her with a bunch of flowers from the market. She recognised these by the newspaper that the flower man used to keep the stems in to keep them moist from the heat. There were promises of eggs, onions, and potatoes from the family huertos if the students passed. There were careful expressions of optimism on how the exams had gone, but nobody could possibly know. They opted to have a week off while recovering and awaiting the results. Sandra felt really flat that week. There was not usually a high pass rate, as the students were not all at the same level, and she was worried that this, her most advanced class, should do well and show to the academy that she was a good teacher. Pepe told her he was definitely leaving that term, as his father had been accepted into a care home and it would be very expensive. However, at least he could keep his job, and he thanked Sandra for her help. In fact, he said, "Without your class, I would never have found the care home, so thank you for that also." Sandra was now totally lost and asked what on earth he was talking about now. "Don't you remember," he said, "Guille told me all about the residencia and how fantastic it was for caring for people with Alzheimer's." So that was the conversation they'd had in Gallego at the end of the class. She lost so much in conversations where her basic Spanish could not follow the slide into the local language. What experience did Guillermo have of Alzheimer's disease? Both his parents seemed to be coping really well from what she could see. At that moment, she decided to cross the cultural bridge and asked Pepe what he meant. The man was leaving her class and she might never see him again. He could only tell her to mind her own business. What experience does Guille have of that residencia? She inquired, holding her breath a little. Sorry, we thought you knew. His wife developed dementia at 38. A very clever woman and a great mother, but sadly there was no treatment and it was impossible for him to care for her. Was? Asked Sandra. I mean, what happened to her? Is she still there or in hospital? It was beginning to make sense. The way Rocío spoke about her mum in the past tense, just memories. She died 2 years ago, sadly. Guille has been alone and working hard to pay off the debts of her care. He was able to tell me there was a vacancy last month when he went there to make his final payment. There's usually a waiting list, but because of Guille being in my class, I had enchufe with the owners, and my father got the room. There it was, enchufe, the connections in Spain that spoke louder than words. When the results were posted on the academy notice board, the teaching staff were first to read them. It had been a good year. All 12 of her B2 level had passed, mostly with 8 out of 10, or notable, as the Spanish deem such an achievement. But 3 of her class had been awarded sobresaliente with 9 points. In fact, in 2 of his exams, Guillermo had scored a perfect 10, listening and speaking. If he had taken Rocío to help with his written paper, he might probably have got a straight 10 in all 4, with a score of 100%. She felt so proud of him, no doubt her favourite student, but with a sad heart she realised he would be leaving her class and probably her life. Returning to the classroom after all the congratulations were over, the students were gone, the academy owners were delighted with her and had already signed up new students for her class based on her success. She saw a pile of things on her desk. Sure enough, there was plenty of vegetables, plants and fruit gifted to her to open enough gifted to her to open a small stall herself. She noticed a jar of honey from Rocío's grandparents' stall. It had been left sitting on a jotter at the corner of the desk. She wondered why he had left his homework book for marking if he wasn't coming back. She opened it carefully. Her heart skipped a beat as she read what he had written. Now again, I am in the market. Will you please have dinner with me tonight in Casa Miguel? There we are. Thank you very much. So now we're going to have part 2 of hearing from Granny Nan. So this is another piece that Fiona wrote for her, and it was for a reunion event of a dozen or so YAMLs. Now, I've been speaking to 1 or 2 people in the interval who've been claiming difficulty with some of the vocabulary. So YAMLs, I think I'm right in saying, are people who are all the same age. Yes? So these were a group of folks who got together for a reunion at aged 80, was it? After all having grown up together in Westray, although they'd gone to different schools. And so this was Fiona's address through her mum to celebrate that event. Here we go. It's called...
In 1928, 33 children were born in Westray. So in 2008, those of them who were still around arranged to have a reunion meal at Kirkwall Hotel and then a tour around the island. Again, Fiona had a poem for me to read at the meal. There's many special folk today have gathered hereabouts. We call it a reunion, for we all have the same roots. All have sprung from Westray soil, a crop of the same year. Some returned from pastures new, but some had bidden here. They say octogenarians are geriatrics too. We're meant to sit and do the things that old folk used to do. But we're lively, active citizens, and hobbies we had plenty. But nowadays I think you'll find the 80s the new 20. Among the gamins who were speared, a dozen have consented to come along with partners, and all three schools are represented. Clara went to Midby and another went to Scullom. 8 had been to Kirkwall, but Jack was a roaming fellow. Despite the trend for women to be spared beyond the men, the boys seem to have lasted well. We still had 8 for them. The lasses lack in quantity. There's only 4 still here. Maybe the shortage was for chop bait a bachelor at Vida. There's been some emigration as folk eat over the sea. Daisy set off for Kirkwall, and the same thing happened to me. David did to Stronsey, and George got a Finnsman wife, while John set off for the deep, deep south and ended up in Fife. Billy stayed, and Marcus, to keep the home fires burning. Gavin had to do the same and keep the lighthouse turning. Bessie took to knitting, her pins are always twirling, and Annie took to the dance floor, and still you see her birling. When we all started at the school, the average age was 5. We never thought we'd see this age and still whack up alive. For health and strength we're grateful, we're glad that we can go. Let's plan our next reunion, but not leave it quite so long.
I've been ruthless in approaching everybody I could think of that might have a connection with Fiona, so that we could have lots of different dimensions of her personality and character and all the things she did. And so Sheila had a particular connection and partnership with Fiona, and she's going to come and read something that Fiona wrote for a Burn Supper, a reply to the Toast to the Lassies, 100 Years Orkney Lassies. Sheila, come and tell us about it.
Well, my connection with Fiona was through CE camp, and Fiona was really special. She was someone who showed me that you can be a Christian and still be fun. And as well, I suppose this also gives a bit light to her saying that CE also stood for Courting Encouraged. So this 100 years Orkney Lasses. To be a lass in Orkney in 1895 would be a mystery to most of us. There's few that's still alive. We have one of them here tonight. Miss Sangster is her name. A lot of things she knew have changed. There's no much stayed the same. To be a lass in Orkney in the year of 1908 meant rising up at daybreak and washing clays till late. They had no tumble dryers then, quilts dried out on the grass. The servant lasses did the work, for it made the mistress wes. To be a lass in Orkney in 1927, the year that started well for a Rendell lass, were a baby sent from heaven. A pretty boy with smiling face, the neighbours came to look. He's here and smiling still the night, they call him Jim O'Crook. To be a lass in 1931, the commercial world was limited to a visit for the van. It was easier than walking to the shop, saving on the legs, and payment for your messages was butter, cheese or eggs. To be a lass in 1945, The boys fae Houghton left for home, glad still to be alive. Will the Kirkwall men seem boring and the dancing not much cope, but the barriers meant new talent with boys up for the hope. To be a lass in 1959, you could venture out in a miniskirt on days when the weather was fine. It did look right if your legs were white and your feathers started frowning. If the Orkney sun had let you down, you could tan with gravy browning. To be a lass in 1963, you could spend a heartening evening and bide home to watch TV. The Beatles and Elvis Presley with pictures for pieces far flung. The men might just be black and white, but they did not stink of dung. To be a lass in Orkney in 1974, a brand new grammar school appeared and opened up the door. There was further education for typists and for cooks, and if you did accounts as well, you could learn to cook the books. To be a lass in 1986, they were quite at home with a power drill or a barrel full of bricks. Some days dry stone diking, as good as I have seen, and Gorn started keeping boiler suits in sizes 10, 12 or 14. To be a lass in Orkney in 1995, there's no that many walk to work, most of them can drive. We are briefcakes and our fancy suits, complete with shoulder pads. The Orkney lass of the 90s is just one of the lads. It's 200 years for Robbie Burns wrote verses about his lasses. In this reply, I don't deny, some still like men to make the passes. But warning to all the lads tonight, especially Chairman Moore, don't be threatened by the lasses who ask you to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I think it's great the way that Fiona's poems capture the culture. You know, so that was written as a reply to Toast to the Lassies. And in the book, there are, I think, 3 more. So she wrote poems for occasions, for things that happened as part of Orkney life. And this next one that Karen's going to read was an important traditional part of Westray life, and maybe she'll explain what that was.
It still is a fairly important part of Westray life if you live in the paradise of the north end of Westray. The Fermoskill that Fiona grew up on is the Acreness Holm. It's a strip of land between Westray and Pappy that at low water is big enough to hold quite a lot of things, and at high water holds a intrepid and brave group of about 40 North Orkney sheep, homies, we call them. And there's a row at the back here, at this side, that have their own tales of adventure involving home days. That this poem refers to the annual clipping day on the Acreness Holm. And I mind very well being absolutely horn mad and putzed for days that my brother got a day off the school to go to the clipping at the home, and I did not. I had to go to the school. So there would be a band of worthy gentlemen, mostly, that would gather, and they would head off for the home and catch all this wild, timid and very nimble and agile sheep and clip them and take some home, and then they would be feasting on return, and a lot of capers and nonsense on the way. So there's, as I say, there's a few different adventures on the back row, but that's for another night. So this one's called Home Day. Oh, I meant to say as well that when I was living, we moved for the village out to the north end of Westray, and me bedroom window looked out our Acreness home. So the home, apart from jealously wanting to go on clipping days, and I have a lot of memories looking out our the home on bony days and wild days. Early light, oars dipping, quiet ripples round the bot, scories scraking, selkies watching, at the beach the tangs afloat. On the home, the boat at anchor, ferry all the hands ashore. Start the gathering, then the catching. Counting yows, there's 84. Men are clipping, rolling fleeces, while the women make the tea. Buns are eating, fancy's finished, and the sheep now running free. Heeding him, we 6 on the trailer, bun for skill. rosy cheeks and empty puggies. Soup is ready, just as well. 20 men around the table as the plates come thick and fast. What na feed and what na banter, till the duff appears at last. And Linda made the duff the night, it's very good.